All right, well, thank you everybody for being here tonight. My name's Tom Fayram, and I'm the Deputy Public Works Director for the County of Santa Barbara. And I really appreciate everybody taking time to be here this evening, with some of you coming quite a long way all the way from the East Coast. So thank you all for being here. A couple of housekeeping items. We have restrooms are out to the left by the elevators. The men's on the far side, women's on the close side. And we have waters at the back table. So if you need water, I certainly will. By the time I'm done talking, please feel free to grab a water, and there's a water fountain outside to the right or to the left as well. And then also, just to let you know, this workshop is being recorded and will be on the county's YouTube channel. So you can feel free to go back and rewatch. You'll be so interested, you'll want to watch it again, and so you'll have that opportunity to do that on YouTube. So the purpose of our workshop tonight. So we've have this project been in the works, and we've got our design team. And if you were at the environmental hearing, we're not talking about the environmental at this is design, but we're well down the line to try to implement a project. And I think I've mentioned before, we're trying to do a project of this scope at a lightning speed when it comes to a government agency that has to fulfill all its obligations under the law. To put a project of this scale in is quite a feat. So we're going to talk about where we are in this project, look at the path forward, and we'll have a schedule that you'll see a little bit later that John will talk about. It's our wish, and if everything falls in place, we think we can meet that target. But there's a lot of things that have to happen between now and then ultimately receive input from you all to hear what you think about the design of the project. Again, we're focusing on the design of the project. So today we're going to have a presentation and talk about all these elements, the project goals, the permitting, the funding issue, which is a huge issue here, and our schedule, and then we'll have time for your questions. I believe Lisa has sent some cards around. We really do want to capture all the questions because we're going to have them located in one site on our website so that everybody can go back and see what everybody's question was. And I believe we're also accepting questions online as well, if you're listening at home and you want to do that. And so at this point, I want to bring up our supervisor for the 1st District, Supervisor Das Williams, who's been a huge supporter of our endeavor to get this project. So Supervisor Williams.
Thank you, Tom. I just was walking precincts, and Mike Ledbetter asked, "Is Tom still in charge of this?" And I said, "Yes," and he was relieved. So, hey, I just want to say hello and want to thank some folks because really there really is, this hasn't gotten this far by accident. It's been because of a great willingness, openness, and patience from the neighbors. So those of you that occupy land that we want to acquire to build this debris basin, we just want to thank you for that. And I also want to thank, at a broader picture, all the people who are working on trying to improve our flood control capacity. Both the projects that the county is engaged in, and we are engaged in making structural alterations on a number of these debris basins so that we don't just improve the watershed in the San Ysidro watershed, but do it throughout the community. I also want to thank the Partnership for Resilient Communities who are here. Pat McElroy's right in back. Their work to do the debris nets, something we really are appreciative of at the county. And for that reason, we have taken over the cleanup bond to help enable them to put up the last 2 debris nets. So that's, I think, happening this week or this month, right, Pat? So there now be 6 nets up. And I want to thank one person in particular, who I'm going to ask to come up in a second, who is Curtis Skeen, who is a downstream neighbor and somebody who has made this a personal mission And he has even broadened his mission to try to look at flood control capacity and improving flood control capacity throughout Montecito. And he's founded another nonprofit that's going to partner with the county to help make that happen. I'm going to ask him in just a moment as I wrap up to come up and say a couple, just brief words. But I want to tell you that really the reason why Tom and I are so engaged in this is we don't want another disaster cycle to pass by before we make some fundamental change and fundamental preparation to increase our resiliency and increase our safety. Some of you have lived through other cycles where something bad happens and everybody cares about it for 2 years, and then people forget about it and move on. We don't want to let that pass. We want to make sure the county is committed and the community is committed to making those fundamental changes. Curtis, come on up.
Thanks. Well, I just wanted to take 1 second and say a couple of things. First of all, it's amazing for me to look around this room and see that there's so many people in this room that I've worked individually with, that my partner Chris and I have worked individually with, and to see you all in the same room is really terrific, and to reach this point is huge. In the course of the last year, we've had a number of neighbors and friends that have come to us and said, terrific what you're doing on San Ysidro Creek, but what else can you do on Montecito Creek, Buena Vista? So Chris and I have decided, we've set up a nonprofit organization, Partners in Community Renewal, and we are going to work with the county, with Tom, John, and we're going to see what else we can do on these other creeks to mitigate a 1/9 event. So I cannot say enough about the folks in the county. Das, everybody, Tom, John, there's too many people to mention. You all have no idea how hard these people work, day in and day out, and on weekends. And you all should feel comforted. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor and Curtis. I just also wanted to note that we've got a lot of folks that are here, especially some of the environmental permitting agencies, and Maureen's going to talk about that in a little bit. And I just wanted to emphasize what the supervisor said is about, when you have a disaster, through all the perils of the disaster, there comes opportunity. We see that frequently. And this is an opportunity to improve, all of the area below the Randall Road Basin, and then as Curtis said, moving onward, taking a look at all areas in Montecito. Now's the time to do this while it's fresh in everybody's mind, and also there are funding dollars that we're actively chasing on that as well. And then just to put it back, counter what Curtis said, we can't do this without you all and without your all cooperation and encouragement. A project like this would be a very difficult task without the assistance and all of the support that we've received from a lot of you. We'll receive some criticism on that too, and that's understood, and we'll do our best to address that, but we do appreciate all of your support on that. So now I'm going to introduce John Fry, who's the engineering manager, and he's going to talk a little bit about the history of the area.
Thank you, Tom. And good evening. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. Okay. So I just have a couple slides I'm going to go through showing the history of the area. I think most of you probably already know what the history of the area is, but the reason I have to have this piece of paper here with me is because I pulled out a 1974 Army Corps of Engineers report called the Montecito Streams, and they listed the documented flooding events that go all the way back to 1862. So I'm going to tick these years off to you. And the point is going to be that not if a flood is going to happen again, but when, okay? And things go in cycles. So 1862, 1909, 1914, 27, 38, 62, 64, 67, 69, 71. The report was 1974, and maybe Tom can help me out after 74. I know we had 79, right? 83. We had a couple big events in 95, 01, 05, 2010, 2011. It's not even talking about what we just went through the past couple years ago. So, and fire goes in cycles too. So hopefully the watershed is going to heal quickly. But what is the cycle? 20 years, 30 years? I don't know. I don't really need to go into this too much, but this is the motivator for what we're here to talk about tonight. Couple pictures. I could have slide after slide of pictures of the exact same vantage point with two different years that go back to those flood events that I just listed. This is just one slide. Happens to be of Mountain Drive at San Ysidro Creek. Let's see here. Well, I'll hit the wrong button if I try to do a laser pointer. But if you can see the curved 22-inch diameter steel pipeline in the black and white photo, that's the gas line. It's curved like a piece of spaghetti. That's from the 1964 event. And of course, it's that same gas line that we see providing the smoke in the lower right-hand corner as well. One more slide, I couldn't help it. So this is San Ysidro Creek in the Glen Oaks area. The picture on the left is 1964. The picture on the right is 2019. I'll say that again, 2019. Not 2018, but 2019. This was just the past winter, winter number 2 after the debris flow. The channel's all filled in with material. So we're here to find solutions as Tom has mentioned, as Supervisor Williams has mentioned, as Curtis has mentioned. And the opportunity was presented to us along the Randall Road. Perfect location for a debris basin. And that's what we're in hot pursuit of. So I'm going to introduce Leslie Brooks. She is our design consultant working for a firm called Reco. We have worked with them in the past very successfully. They designed some modifications for us on a debris basin we call the Gubernador debris basin. These modifications were built about 10, 11 years ago. Of course, we entered into a long drought afterwards, but it performed tremendously in the debris flow, and we're going to take that design and apply it to some other projects. But point is, we've got a strong record of success with this firm. Leslie?
Thank you, John. All right, hello everybody. Like John said, my name is Leslie Brooks. I am the project manager for the Randall Road Debris Basin with Reco. So I'm going to talk about the project goals, project challenges, and then kind of our preliminary design and the considerations that we have going forward with the design. So when we talk about the project goals, I want to make sure that it's clear that, you know, Randall Road Debris Basin isn't going to be able to fix everything within the watershed, but what we do think we can do is, oh, sorry, yes. So Randall Road isn't going to be able to fix everything that's going on in the watershed, but we do see an opportunity with the funding and with the land available to have a real positive impact within this watershed and for the downstream areas, so we want to take advantage of that. The biggest goal is to reduce the downstream impacts of debris deposition. Everybody will recognize these photos from the 2018 event. You had really large boulders, large rock coming down through San Ysidro Creek and getting deposited within this area. It kind of got choked off around East Valley Road, spilled over East Valley Road, and continued through the homes and neighborhoods there. So we do want to have a focus on making sure we capture that large debris. Where we capture it is we want to take the opportunity to capture it in the location where it naturally wants to go. What we have up here is a change detection of ground surface. So what it's showing is it compares the 2016 ground elevation to the 2018 post debris flow ground elevation. And it's a comparison. So everything you see in green is where sediment or debris was accumulated. Everything in red is where it was scoured or sediment was taken away. Everything in yellow is kind of just, it was very close between the 2016 and 2018 event. So you'll see we have Randall Road running north-south right here, East Valley Road. This blue line indicates the outline of the proposed Randall Road debris basin. So you see where we're trying to mimic that natural sedimentation pattern and use that area available to us to capture that sediment where that sediment wants to be. Secondary benefits of the project include providing open space. That's a benefit to both the watershed and to the community. Increasing groundwater infiltration where we can through that open space. And then providing hiking access. So there will be a trail adjacent to Randall Road that's going to be offered to the Montecito Trails Foundation and county parks. Here we have the San Ysidro Trail in red. Randall Road is just here, so it's not going to directly connect currently, but there is the potential for a future connection to that San Ysidro Trail. Now, Randall Road itself will be blocked by a gate, so there won't be vehicular public access to Randall Road, but the gate will have an opening for pedestrians and hiking access through that gate. So every project has its goals, but it also has its challenges. So I'm going to touch on those. And one of the biggest challenges, especially if you're looking at any creek project, is making sure you balance the function of the stream and the different stream functions with your project. So this image is, you can think of it as a scale. And on the right-hand side, you have the amount of water and the speed of the water that's dictated by that stream slope. And then on the left-hand side, you have the amount of sediment and the size of sediment. And these two things need to be in balance because if you have too much flow that's moving too fast, you're going to get degradation through your stream system or scour. If you have too much sediment or too large a sediment, you're going to get aggradation, which means it's going to just accumulate and fill in your creek, as John showed. So it's really important to make sure we hit that balance between the amount of flow and the amount of sediment. There are also evolving conditions within the watershed that I'm sure many of you have seen firsthand, but what we have down here on the left is it's a graphic showing the profile of San Ysidro Creek from two different dates. The red line is October 18th, the stream flow line of that creek, and then the blue line is April 2019. So again, just one winter, and within that timeline, we see degradation of about 4 feet. So that stream flow line is dropping currently, and that's just one winter. So as the project moves forward and as we continue with design, there's no guarantee that the stream's going to look the way it does today by the time we get to construction. So those evolving conditions are something we're taking into account. Also upstream, so this is an image of Gubernador and the improvements that were made back in 2006 for that project. We're doing something similar on the San Ysidro debris basin. Right now it's just that solid rock embankment with the low flow channel, and we're moving to a more open outlet structure. What this does is it allows a more natural sediment transport process. So you have those finer sediments, the smaller gravelly sediments continuing through the system. We're hoping that will help with some of the aggradation happening downstream, that it won't scour there as much because you'll have a more natural sediment transport. And so that in itself is going to have impacts downstream in the Randall Road area throughout that creek system as well. We also have the constraints of just the site that we're working with. We have here in pink is kind of the outline of the parcels and easements that are currently being acquired by the county. That's the area that we have to work within. We also have a limiting factor on the south with East Valley Road and the Caltrans right-of-way that goes with that. There's existing utilities within the location. Along Randall and East Valley Road, we have water line, sewer line, gas line. We want to make sure that the project doesn't negatively impact those. And while Randall Road will be closed off to public access, we will still need to be able to utilize it for fire, utility, and maintenance purposes. So that's another reason why it's important to keep Randall Road kind of in place. And then there's also fish passage requirements that we have to look at for the stream throughout the length of the project. So preliminary design considerations, we've been working with the county, kind of looking at really conceptual designs of what this basin's going to look like based on those goals and what we're trying to achieve. And these are schematics that were developed that kind of give you an idea of what it would look like. Oh, there we go. So here you can see kind of if you were looking north from East Valley Road, you have the stream going down the center. Then at a certain raised elevation, there's a bank and a widened section for the debris flow and for the debris basin, and then that gets raised up and ties into the existing ground elevation. This is much more of a post-construction, what it would look like right after it was constructed, so you see a lot of exposed ground and earth. Over on the right-hand side is a little bit more of what it would look like once vegetation has been planted and established. From an engineering perspective, this is what I see when I look at those schematics, is the plan and profile view of what that design would look like. So we've kind of switched the orientation, but we have Randall Road down here, East Valley Road up here. You can see the stream continuing through the center, and then this is kind of like where it's benched off and then drops back down into these debris basins, the largest on the west and then a smaller debris basin on the east over there. Other design considerations, things like having an access ramp so that maintenance crews can get down in there and clean it out when necessary. Debris racks that could be used to help capture some of those larger debris as well. But the real function that's happening is that as the larger storm events come through, those flows are going to widen out into the debris basin. That widening of the flows makes the velocity go down. And as the velocity goes down, there's not as much energy for those larger sediments and boulders to continue through. So as the velocity drops, so do all the larger boulders. So we're still in the early phases, but we wanted to, reach out during this early phase to get comments and input and feedback. Right now, we're continuing with the modeling. So we have hydraulic models, excuse me, to run all of these different scenarios. And they look at, just exactly where we're going to bench off the stream and then how big the basin can be. And we're getting geotech reports in right now about, what side slopes we can handle and things of that nature. But we do feel that with the preliminary design we have now, that we can meet all these goals that I mentioned earlier on. So now I'm going to hand it over to Maureen Spencer. She's going to be talking about the permitting requirements for the project as we have it proposed right now.
Oh, yeah. I'm not used to having a microphone. I usually just talk really loud, so let me know if I'm yelling. I'm Maureen Spencer. I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about permitting. With every project, there are regulations, and in this particular case, we're in a stream channel, and so we're going to be getting permits from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We'll get a stream alteration agreement. From the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we'll be getting a 404 permit, and through that process, we'll also do a consultation with the National Marine Fisheries Service under the Endangered Species Act for steelhead, which are listed as endangered under the federal law. And then for the Regional Water Quality Control Board, we're going to get a water quality certification, and we'll be submitting those applications really soon as we get closer to the 30% plans. And we've been interacting with the regulatory agencies already, so they all know about it. And we have representatives from the Regional Water Quality Control Board, Fish and Wildlife, FEMA is also here tonight, as well as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. National Marine Fisheries Service was not able to come tonight. And so if you guys would like to have anything to say tonight, I'd be glad to give you the microphone in terms of your process and your contribution.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Crystal Huerta. I'm with the Army Corps of Engineers. I've been working with Santa Barbara County Flood Control District for a while on emergency permitting in the area. And then we've been briefed about this project, and we received a permit application, and we're in the process of continuing to review it. It's not complete yet, but there will be consultation associated with that. I'm not sure if just NIMS, maybe Fish and Wildlife Service too. And within that, we're also going to be making an effect determination on the National Historic Preservation Act too. So we have to do that. And then the Corps works with FEMA over here to make sure that we follow our memorandum of agreement to figure out who the lead federal agency is. And so right now we're in that process of making that determination. I think that's all I have.
Yeah, I'm Alessandro Amalio. I'm with FEMA, the environmental officer, and I have not much to add because you cover very well. The agreement we have with the Corps is that depending on the type of permit, will be FEMA or the Corps being the lead in covering all those compliances. So if the Corps of Engineers determine that the permit is individual due to the type of work and the permanent situation of the creek, then the Corps of Engineers is going to be responsible to do all the consultations. And FEMA is going to support, but you are the lead, right? So contrary to that, if it becomes a nation or regional permit, then FEMA will be the lead in the consultation and the Corps will follow the documentation that we do. So we are basically on the waiting to see what is really the design and what triggers the lead agency determination. So, and then FEMA is money too, right?
That's why we like you at our party. Do you guys have anything to say?
My name is Sarah Rains. I'm with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I work on the stream bed alteration agreement that will eventually be coming in for this. And that's a process that comes through. It's about 30 days to review for the complete, 60 days to see if it's to write the actual agreement. And then there's the back and forth for making sure all the measures are agreeable. But it's a little process, and the last thing that we have before we can execute our agreement is the CEQA has to be finalized. The California Environmental Quality Act has to have all their review and has to be finalized, and then we can execute it. So that's what we do.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mark Cassidy with the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, and I'm in the 401 unit, so we prepare the 401 water quality certifications for projects that are going to affect state waters through any kind of excavation or fill activities in state waters. And you talk to us, and we work with applicants such as Maureen on the applications.
So we're really glad that they were able to come tonight because we work really closely with them. And also just to follow up on what Crystal said about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we have the National Marine Fisheries Service for Section 7 for steelhead, and we also have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for Section 7 for other species that are listed. In this case, we actually did what we refer to as protocol level surveys for the California red-legged frog. Of the listed species that could be there, that is one, and we didn't find any of those. So we'll still have to go through the consultation, but it's likely to be just an informal consultation with that agency. And so one of the things that Sarah mentioned is California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and we're required to do that. The federal agencies deal with NEPA. And so we started this already, like Tom said, we've been moving on this project like it's going to happen, and we've hired Padre to do that CEQA document, and Simon Poulter is here from Padre. And we did the scoping hearing in February of 2019. And that was just to let everybody know what we're moving forward with and to receive comments from people and from a CEQA standpoint. Again, tonight we're mainly focusing on the design standpoint. We expect to have a draft EIR in the spring or summer of 2020, and that part of that process is a 45-day public comment period. And then during that public comment period, we'll also have an environmental hearing to receive more public comment. For people who don't want to do written comments, they can come and see what other people are saying and just hear a little bit more about what that draft environmental document looks like. And then we're expecting to have a final EIR ready for approval in the fall or winter of 2020. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to John, and he's going to talk about project funding.
Thank you, Maureen. Well, a pretty important element of this project is funding. That goes without saying. We have 3 grant applications in on this one project alone. But that doesn't really matter because FEMA is reviewing the project as one grant application. It's a roughly, in round numbers, $20 million project. It's a substantial amount of money for us as a flood control district. We do not have the funding to support a project like this, and so that's why we are pursuing this FEMA funding. And if we're successful, then the federal government will provide 75% of that $20 million project, and the locals, us, will provide a 25% cost share. Still pending final approval. It's been in the works for some time, and as we've heard from all the others that have already spoken, we've been in close contact working it, and we don't know exactly when we will get that final determination, but all indications are very positive, very optimistic. And as we have indicated, we're pursuing every aspect of this project as if we've got funding in hand, because when we get that funding, we don't want now the finger to be pointed at us for delaying even further what we want to construct in 2021. Schedule. Maureen just went over the schedule for the environmental document. I won't repeat that. Design, we're currently in the 30% stage of the design, targeting a complete 100% design in the spring of 2021. Permits are I won't say in process because we haven't formally submitted for the permits yet. It depends on the 30% design, but our staff with Maureen have been in close contact with all the regulatory agencies, as we've already heard. Right-of-way acquisition will formally begin once the federal's National Environmental Policy Act work is done, NEPA. That's what that acronym stands for. So that process has to take place before funding can be advanced for property acquisition. And as I mentioned earlier, we are targeting a start of construction and a completion of construction in 2021. That is the schedule. We feel it's doable if everything lines up, and we're going to make our darndest sure that everything does line up with everything that's in our control. We want to keep the community informed in any way, shape, or form we can. We do have some resources that are listed here, whether it's contacting questions through Lisa at the top, email address there, and we can make this information more easily available to all of you. Questions that are generated from this meeting tonight, that don't get answered tonight, maybe even those that do get answered tonight, we're going to compile them and post them on a link on our website. And this presentation will be archived and available at any time that you might want to come back and view it, or inform your neighbors to come back and watch it. I believe I hand it back to Tom. Yeah.
Thank you, John. So we're coming to the end here. I hope our message to you all, I've been with County Flood Control District for 33 years, and normally when we start a project like this, it's very incremental. And what you're seeing here tonight is we're all in. We do not have FEMA approval for the money. We've already hired our design consultant. We've got the EIR consultant. We're applying for permits. We have gone all in. And so you have the commitment from us to do everything in our power to get this done. The supervisor texts me frequently on this. You haven't done it during a Packers football game, so I want to thank you for that. But I'd still answer it. But that's our message to you. And now what I'd like to do is, one, if you want to write questions down, Lisa, are you going to collect those? Or who's going to collect the, okay, so Lisa will come around and we can read those and answer them, or we'll pass the mic, and if you just want to ask a question, we'll either answer it, or if we don't have the information to answer it, then we will take note of it, and we will get that answer back to you. Now, we had a second microphone, I think. It's right here. And yes. I don't know if that was on. Check to make sure it's on. Okay, so questions? Or do you want to do it written? Someone's got to have a question. Bob, did you have a question? Here, we want to use the we want to use the microphone just so we capture it on the
Yes, couple of questions. I haven't heard anybody talk about the capacity of this debris basin. How many acre feet is this thing going to hold? Or not cubic yards, excuse me.
So the project itself, we've moved to what we call line and grade of the actual dimensions of the project. Capacity of a basin is an extremely difficult thing to quantify because it acts differently. In this case, with our open dam projects, it's even more complicated because you don't even have what we would call a static water level. So the project is in excess of 8 acres in footprint, which puts us as one of the larger basins in our inventory. And yeah, because there's 8 parcels of about 1 acre, and then there's a county parcel that's right in the middle, so in excess of 8 acres of footprint, and depth on the order of 8 feet, 8 to 10 feet, 5 to 8 feet. So that's a design detail that we're still working through right now. So that's the best I can answer that one for you.
When you, if you looked ahead and said we had the same rain flow that we had on 1/9, same storm surge that we had up in the mountains, and you take the upper debris basin on San Isidro Creek, and you take this one and the 2 ring nets, do your models show that that would have stopped that deluge of rocks coming down or not?
So I can't address what the ring nets would do. And what I think I can say is the enormity of that debris flow, these 2 basins would not completely capture what came down in 1/9. A very extraordinarily rare event. It certainly would have helped. It certainly would help, especially a lot of the larger rock that would go down. One of the problems that we didn't talk about here that we're looking into, it's the one thing John actually is very interested. We're very interested in trying to find out how, with a debris basin, we can stop the large trees. Generally, they float and they go over the top. It happened at every single one of our basins. So that's a design feature that we didn't really talk about, but what we're looking at. Actually, we're looking at that on all the basins. So the enormity of 1/9, we still would have had significant flow. I mean, just that picture that John showed, that thing came down the entire valley floor. What we would have done is we would have stopped an awful lot of rocks at this location that would not have gone downstream. So we would have stopped a lot, but we wouldn't have stopped it all.
Does your 20 million, could you break that out? How much of that goes to land acquisition? I heard the land acquisition was going to be close to 20 million. How much for the construction of the debris basin, and how much for all the permitting and all that stuff?
Well, the land acquisition hasn't happened yet. I probably shouldn't comment on that because that's an item that we have ongoing discussions with the landowners. I will tell you that our construction cost is estimated in the 5 to 8 million.
And could you comment on anything to say on if this is successful? Do you have any thoughts on Montecito Creek or Romero doing the same thing?
We have FEMA applications in on Romero, the upper San Ysidro, and Cold Springs. We actually have 2 applications in on Cold Springs. One is to modify the dam, and one is to expand its footprint. So we're looking at all of that. And we have FEMA applications in, and I'm sure they'll look very fondly upon all those applications, right, Alessandro? Yes. Those applications are much smaller, so it'll be really easy for FEMA to approve those. Thank you for your questions, Bob. And then right behind Lewis there.
John wasn't really clear about all these flooding events, whether these were flooding events or debris flow events. I was wondering if you could mention, the difference there. And also, I'm under the understanding that these structures are designed for flooding events and the debris with flooding events, not so much a debris flow, which really you have no clue if they're going to work or what they're going to do.
So all of our debris basins worked in the debris flow. Cold Springs in particular. I went out there the day after, and I was looking up at a mound of rocks in that basin. It got overwhelmed, but it did its job. All of these basins did their job in a debris flow. You're right, a debris flow is different from a flood. In terms of Randall Road, and I will talk specifically about that, it is in a little bit of a different situation than in a canyon pinch point like the upper San Ysidro Creek is. And as such, the debris flow came down the whole valley floor. And our debris basin is quite a significant part of that valley floor. So it would have stopped, a lot of large rocks stopped there anyway, naturally. We would have stopped more, it would work well. We have, I think what John was saying is that flood flows are what we would call debris-laden floods. We all know in 69, Curtis, you were a little kid here when you living in that same house, 69, the debris that comes down in a flood. It acts a little differently for 2 reasons. One is that the debris flow is a slurry of soil, sand, dirt, ash that will actually easily transport large rocks. A flood has a harder time. A flood generally rolls them by using whatever buoyancy that the water gives them more in the stream channel until the stream channel gets plugged up and then overflows. This basin will work quite well in a debris-laden flood, and as the other ones do as well. So it will beneficially impact both cases. The debris flow being typically a larger event, it will only do what it can capture. And a debris-laden flood, it will be highly effective in this location. It's historically, this location has suffered over the many years, and having volume there to be a resting point for the larger debris and let the finer material go through will be a huge benefit to us. So I hope that answered your question. I think right behind you, there was a question.
Between now and you start in 2021, will there be any attempt to clean up the site?
So the site, currently we own 2 parcels that are in there. Maybe I can go back to that. Well, maybe that's the best one. So currently, there's a piece of county-owned property that's right next to the creek there. There's actually been some equipment that's been using that. We have purchased this house, which is called the Daniels house, and then the remaining property is private property. Now, when we acquire the property, I think our first move will to get rid of all the debris that we can. We haven't gotten that far on the construction planning, but my thought is that we get rid of the debris through a demo contractor. And then when the construction comes in, where you're just moving earth and rock, that would be a separate contract. Don't know whether or not we'll actually do it that way, but if we do it that way, we'll get rid of a lot of the stuff that's out there earlier, because there is a lot of stuff that's still out there. I mean, it still looks like it suffered through a traumatic event, and so I understand your question about wanting that to maybe look better. But as it stands right now, we only own those 2 parcels. Yeah, let's get you the microphone just so that. Okay.
There's a hole right there where the new drainage went in. I think it was McDonald's property, the first piece on Randall. And right on the 192, there's a hole there. It's kind of near where the porta potty is, kind of in that area. And I'm the one that goes and puts the cones around them. And twice the cones have been taken away. And I put them up the 3rd time. Now whenever they have workers on 192, I go and make sure, don't take those cones away. Because I feel that it's a possible place where a car could go in. So, and there's no railing, there's no guard railing, there's no temporary railing, there's no protection. And I've tried to contact the county about it a couple of times. And I just want to know how, when he's talking about maybe the looks of that area, I'm concerned about the probability that a car could just, or a motorcycle could go into that.
So let me ask you if I point, are you talking about that area right there?
It's right across from the Gowers property on the other side of 192.
Down here?
It's a culvert. It's a hole. It's literally about 12, 15
Okay.
feet deep. McDonald's.
Okay. Thank you. It's that, yeah, there you go. There. Oh, that one right there. Yeah, there you go.
So it's right here. I've often wondered why it's there
Okay.
in the first place.
Okay, is that in Caltrans? All right, we will follow up with Caltrans on that.
Just an idea that you guys had temporary barricades on the both bridges, the Glen Oaks Bridge and the 192 bridge. So temporary was to let people know you could fall in here. So just an idea of having at least a temporary something there that's more than just these little ugly cones that I described.
Okay, so. Okay, so we'll take note of that. Caltrans, you don't go do work on Caltrans property either without a permit, but we certainly have a way to contact them and get a hold of them. So I appreciate that comment. So we'll follow up with that. Other questions? Ms. Riskin.
You said you had to go through the NEPA process, and when do you expect that to be completed?
So I think a lot of that will, I'll take a shot at this, Maureen, and if I get it wrong, you can let me know, or Crystal. Crystal said she'll have us our permit tomorrow. No? Okay, all right, well, I tried. No, so to do the NEPA, we have to get them a good enough set of plans that they can do their evaluation. And then what I think will really drive this is the consultation with the resource agencies, the National Marine Fisheries and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, not to be confused with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so to that extent, Maureen's already met with National Marine Fisheries. Actually, I think you've talked to everybody except maybe not U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. If there's a Section 7 consultation, by law, they have 135 days. So that's, 4.5 months. We're hoping that we can work through that faster. Obviously, we've plugged in all the elected representatives to have whatever assistance of encouragement that this is a high priority project for the community, and we have a window that we don't want to lose. But I think we're projecting NEPA to be done perhaps in the summer, and that would probably be the closest. And again, it all depends on really what comes out of National Marine Fisheries would be what I would be concerned about. Is that a fair assessment, Crystal?
So I think in the slides that were shown, I saw that there's 100% designs in the summer of 2021. I'm not sure what NIMS requires as part of our consultation process, but I think there was 60% drawings. I think in the past they've used 60% drawings, and I think that was slated for summer of 2020. And so I think that's kind of like a more feasible time frame to think of from that projection.
I also wanted to add that with National Marine Fisheries Service, we've already met with them once, and we'll also be giving them the 30% plans. And so it's not going to be new at any particular. It was already new last year, and so that we're going to give the 30% plans, and they're going to make comments on that, and then Crystal will get even more information from us, and then move quickly through that. But it is definitely a process, but they have used 30% plans to begin their analysis.
Other questions? You again, Bob? Oh, let's start there, and then we'll come back to Bob.
You said this would be a design meeting, so I was concerned, and the Glen Oaks, a few of us are from Glen Oaks here, and the board is meeting tonight, so we're kind of talking for them. But the concern from the Glen Oaks group is that you were speaking of the how it's going to be screened from 192. What will it look like? You kind of had this sort of picture, and you did some watercolors on their first meeting to show us. And the screening looks, from what I can see, again, it looks more of the same of that, blocking off the view of it from 192. I wanted to reiterate, is that going to be the case where you can't see down into it from 192? And my second part is, with the parking, thank you. The parking, there was, in the very first pictures, they had showing parking on 192, which we were very concerned. People, if they parked in, they would come out onto 192, and it'd be very dangerous, again, a safety thing. If there's going to be parking and you decide to put it on Randall, could that gate then be pushed back up the road a bit to put the parking on that as a compromise?
I believe that's the direction we're moving, yes, based on those comments. And Maureen might want to talk about the vegetation screening.
Yeah, to answer your question about the parking, we'll start with that. We realized that you guys had some concerns about that. And so those artist renderings were very, very preliminary. And so we have decided to go ahead and push any parking up Randall Road a ways, and then we're going to set back that gate. And so that will be...
That was an example.
That was
from
an
another,
example
that was
gate.
from another project.
And those were old, yeah. Right, those are the original artist renderings, and those were very preliminary. And so as we're moving forward in the design, that'll change. And so to answer your question about the screening, so from 192, you have 192, and then you will have a raised berm that will be the edge of that debris basin, and that'll be completely revegetated. And so you'll have trees and shrubs and
Will that also be on the east side of St. Lucia Creek?
It will be along 192, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Bob?
Tom, I'm still having trouble getting my head around this community safety issue and trying to figure out whether this is a big deal, a medium-sized deal, or a little deal. And when you look at the facts, I mean, we're going to have more floods. I mean, that's going to happen, and you all have acknowledged that. The gold standard for protection is the 208,000 acre-feet Santa Monica Basin that saved Carpinteria. And we were headed for projects of that size until the oil spill came along and all the priorities changed and debris basins went out of favor and fish came into favor and protection of the environment. So I guess I'm still trying to figure out whether, then there was this, both debris basins on this creek were scheduled for removal 6 months prior to the last 1/9 debris flow. And so I'm trying to figure out, is this a Band-Aid or is this a significant debris basin that really is going to drop our insurance rates and make everybody happy to live in Montecito as a safe place community? Or is this just a kind of a nice thing to have that sort of adds a little bit of extra capacity?
Fair question. That's a fair question, Bob. And let me try to answer that. So in the window that we have now, a Santa Monica type debris basin, even in its day, was better than a decade in the works. And it only really made it because it had documented impacts and projected impacts to the entire city of Carpinteria. And so the economic benefits were there for a project of that scale. Now, I don't know if we'd have the economics to make something like that work here or not, but I do know this: we can do this. So we can do this, and we can do it now. And then, you look at the problem in Montecito of the debris, which complicates where the water goes. You have two factors: water conveyance and controlling the debris. Debris control starts from the top down, and flood conveyance starts from the bottom up. So to start this thing, we're working on the debris basins that we own and the ones we want to build. There's this one and the one on Buena Vista. And if you look at the Board of Supervisors agenda meeting tomorrow, there's another grant that we received, actually, believe it or not, for Santa Monica, to improve Santa Monica from the Natural Resources Conservation Service. While we're building the debris control top down and improving it, when we start this larger capacity master plan, we're going to try to identify what type of hydraulic improvements can we get through Montecito. I don't see concrete channels working. I see widened natural channels, and that's going to come with a pretty significant price tag there. And that will follow. Actually, the Corps of Engineers, their planning group, not Crystal, is completing what's called a floodplain management study. And that'll be the kickoff point for doing this this hydraulic capacity. That's going to take time. And so, but what we have been doing since the debris flow is finding out what we can go after and what we can deliver now. And we don't want to lose that opportunity. If we were to go and abandon this and say we're going to go for a Santa Monica type debris basin on San Ysidro Creek, I don't think you or I will be here to see it. Lewis, let me get you.
Regarding, you said you're going to be making changes to other basins, and then this basin will have an increased capacity for catching trees. And I'm wondering, is it structures like the racks, or are you going to have trees growing in them, or what's going to be different that's going to catch trees?
There's a couple of things that we could do. One thing we found in the debris flow, what catches trees is other trees, especially oak trees, right? Right, Curtis? And Mr. McDonald? Yeah. Problem with that is oak trees take a while to get that big, but if I could have my way, I'd have this whole thing lined right here. Yeah, there we go, with mature 100-year-old oak trees, but that's going to be a longer process. We're trying to figure out what can we do maybe in the interim along that berm or somewhere. There's things called tree bollards. I don't know what we're going to do yet. We're kicking this thing off, and it's not to say that we can't modify in the future, or if some new technology or something comes up that we can't look at doing something more. We're looking at it on the other debris basins too. We're not quite sure how to handle the trees. If there was an easy answer, it'd be in, and it's not an easy answer. But we want to look at, when we saw the destructive nature of those trees downstream and throughout Montecito, I think John and I recognized we got to try to do something. You can Google when you get home. I think you can see tree bollards, and there's other things that would actually help to do that. Doing that so it doesn't look ugly will be the challenge. That's why oak trees, 100-year-old tree is perfect, and you can't move a 100-year-old tree and expect it to live. So that's what we're going to try to do.
These bollards would be on the banks, or they'd be throughout the whole basin?
I would go on the downstream side. Could be in basin, but we're hoping that gets buried with rocks. So maybe it's something we put in the basin that sticks up above. We're in the early stage here of that, because this is kind of a relatively new concern that we've had, because even Gubernador, for as well as Gubernador worked, all of the vegetation went over the top, and we're not quite sure the best way to try to capture what we can.
Did Santa Monica capture?
Santa Monica's a different animal, and yes, it did. There's a picture that it was, I don't know what the top level of the pool is. It was several feet deep with entire trees. Yeah, it was indoor. It was a flow. You probably could have walked across it, or John could have walked across it. I wouldn't do that. Thank you, Curtis. Any other questions? Well, oops. Before I turned it back, did you want to close for us, Das? I would just say before Das talks is that we'll be here. If you have specific questions about your property or anything like that, we'll be here. Curtis is here. Again, our team, and we'll stay here as long as is reasonable to answer your questions. I did want to close by thanking you all for coming. I know our friends from the federal and state government come in a long way to be here tonight. It shows their interest in the project, and we have a process to go, but we're going to get there. Also wanted to note that I failed to note that we have Wendy Mota from Supervisor Carr. 12 years. Congressman Carvajal's office is here, and then Vianey Lopez with Assemblywoman Monique Lamone's office is here tonight as well. So thank you both for being here. So I'll turn it over to Supervisor Williams, and want to thank the supervisor for being here and for all his support to us.
So one thing I wanted to do was to address part of your question, Bob. I mean, the basic principle of both the nets and these design of debris basins is similar, is that you have great deal more resiliency for the amount of capacity, or for the size of the structure, because you're not trying to detain all the mud. You are trying to let mud through, and you're trying to detain the rocks and other debris. And I think that's really important. And, I know sometimes there was some ugly fights about fish passage and fish versus people, but if not for those fish regulations, we wouldn't have figured out how much better Gubernador Canyon's design works for its size. So it turns out, because of that experience, that a fish-friendly design actually is better at increasing our safety, because it lets that small grain sediment through and detains the big rocks. And so that's why this is going to perform a whole lot better compared to a traditional design debris basin of its size. This is an orders of magnitude greater capacity for the watershed than what is there currently. And I want to thank, because both our federal and state representatives have helped thus far, both in their communications with FEMA and in the communications, because the state OES gives a priority list to FEMA on the prioritization of different projects. And so I do want to note that they have participated and been helpful. I also just want to thank the long-term partnership with the Montecito Fire District on all of our, and Kevin Taylor, their chief, is here, on all of our emergency response issues. I just want to reiterate that, there is a reason why we took a risk before this project was fully fledged to begin acquiring land. It's because we are immensely committed to making a difference and not going back, right? We put our flag in the sand there, and we're going to make something happen here. And that's, we can't go back now. We're already between their contract and the first property that we acquired, we're $5.5 million into this, right? So we're not going back. And you have my personal commitment, but even more than that, I think the commitment of the institution of our flood control, county flood control district to get this job done. Thank you so much.
All right, so thank you all. We're here, flood control folks. Chief Taylor, thank you for being here. And we're here for any questions. Thank you all again for being here.